How does the Groundhog Day question work in practice? For example, if I took days to decide on something, perfect execution might be decide instantaneously. But in reality, I often can't decide on something in an instant. Any thoughts?
Respectfully disagree. It sounds like you asked the Groundhog Day question, and to remind everybody, the Groundhog Day question is at the end of the week, looking back, if I could get in a time machine and play last week over again, what would I have done differently? What would perfect execution have looked like? Not to beat yourself up, and not because you actually will get a chance to go back in a time machine, but simply because that question theoretically can inspire you to think, what could I have done better last week? And most likely the answer to that question is information that you could put to good use this coming week. Because it tends to be the case that you aren't randomly doing things wrong in your productivity. You tend to predictably do the same things wrong in your productivity. You tend to have the same productivity Achilles heel. So if you can look back and say, you know what, I took 3 hours to make that decision. And in retrospect, I didn't need that. I could have taken 3 minutes to make that decision. Or let's call it, I took 3 days to make a decision that I could have made in 3 hours. So the respectful disagreement, if that's the case, is that I actually think that if a lot of people trusted themselves more, they'd realize you've been doing this for a long time. You've been in this career for a while. You don't even know how much you know. And I would posit that most of the time, the decision that somebody can make in 3 days is worse than the decision that they would make in 30 minutes. This is not a perfectly random decision you're making. You've been in this career path for a decade, 2 decades, maybe even more. You have a lot of the accrued information in you already. You are a trained algorithm. The decision you can make in 30 minutes means that you are trusting yourself and you are pulling a trigger. Often what happens in 3 days is that you go out and because you're insecure, because you have a sense of wanting to protect yourself and cover your rear end, you're going out there and you're taking in all these other inputs, other people's opinions, research online. And often what that does is dilute your instinct. The one thing about this world of abundant opinion, we are swimming in other people's opinions and other people's knowledge. And the problem is that disconnects you from what you think. What do you think? And when you go out there and you start, decision by committee, gathering all this information, doing all this research, talking to all these people, is what can get drowned out and all that is your instinct. And then if the decision doesn't go right, you know what you say to yourself? That wasn't even the decision I would have made. That wasn't my first instinct. My first instinct was the right instinct, and I overturned my instinct because I overgorged and overthought it, and I twisted myself into a pretzel, and all of a sudden now I've made a decision that was the wrong decision, and I took way too long doing it. So I'd respectfully disagree. What I find with most of my clients in most scenarios is that they can make the biggest of life and career decisions often in 30 minutes. If you could go back, so let's call it the time machine question instead of the Groundhog Day question, if that helps, like you process it better. If you could get in a time machine and go back to the beginning of last week, what is one thing you would have done differently with given the information you have now? You know how the week turned out. You know what you did good. You know what you did bad. So if you could critique your performance from last week and go back and replay last week with one new change in the way that you performed last week, what would that one thing be? And my argument to you is that you do that enough times, 5, 6, 7, 8, 50 times, you're going to start to see patterns. Let me give you an example to make this real. I have a lot of people pleasers in my community, and I can't tell you how many people pleasers will answer that Groundhog Day or time machine question as, why did I say yes to that thing I should have said no to? What is wrong? Like, I should have told that person right when they asked me, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And for some reason, I opened my mouth and I said, yes, I can help you with that. And then they see that not just one week, but they say it week after week after week after week. And they start to realize and connect mentally, wow, this is a bigger problem than I thought it was. Like a big portion of my wasted time, my UUW or unplanned unwanted work is coming from me saying yes to things that in the moment I know that I should say no to. Maybe this deserves a little bit more conscious, intentional effort to stop the people-pleasing tendency. That's a good example of how one might go back in the time machine, learn a lesson, give it to your past self, and you would have had a much different outcome this week. And going forward, it's cluing you in to like, hey, this week I really need to check my people-pleasing tendencies. This takes something that was at a sort of subconscious or semi-conscious level, and it pulls it into your conscious, like, wow, my people pleasing is hurting me more than I thought it was. I really need to be directly conscious of not saying yes to things I should say no to. That is the thing that will create a huge positive change in my productivity.